Okay. So good evening, everyone. So tonight we have a great chapter on masks. Well, you know, we're about 5 weeks out, I believe, from Purim, which is the official holiday of masks. So today is we are exactly a month before Purim, because tonight is Tu B'Shvat. It's the birthday of the trees. They get rejuvenated in Israel around this time of year. So, and Purim is the 14th day of Adar of the next month. So Purim is a little bit early this year. It's like the end of February. I think it's February 26th, if I'm not mistaken. It falls out on a Friday, which is unusual, but happens from time to time. And actually, everything we're going to be talking about is very much associated with the idea of Purim and masks. So by a raise of hands, who read this chapter already? Okay, we have Sarah Malka did. Anyone else read this chapter? I don't see, well, we don't have anyone else on video. Linda, did you read this chapter already? Yeah, you did. Okay, great. All right, so I once did a class, and I started off the class with the Phantom of the Opera music. And the Phantom of the Opera is one big mask, right? That's one of the main features of the movie, of the play. Excuse me, of the play. So, and that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz starts this chapter with: that you have theater masks, right? And in theaters, you have two types of masks. You have the comic, and you have the tragic. You have the big smiley face, the clown, if you will, or the jester, and then you have the tragic, the person who's crying or in pain. And the reality is that we live our life with many, many masks. And what he does through this chapter is he demonstrates to us how masks are a bad thing and masks are a good thing. And a lot of that depends on how we're using the masks, why we're using the masks, and what type of masks we are choosing to use. So all of those play into whether a mask is actually good or not. Human behavior is very often our most common mask. The way we behave has a lot to do with things that we want to reveal while we also want to hide. So, we learn maneuvers, mannerisms, a way about ourselves, which is very often a way of giving an impression. The whole idea of giving an impression means that I'm creating a mask. It means I'm hiding who I am so I can impress. And I write, a decent amount about this in my book about hiding, which is a very unhealthy way to live, because when we're hiding, and the way we hide is by creating masks, and of course it doesn't necessarily mean a literal mask as they have in the theater, but it means anything that we can hide behind, and we're very sophisticated, so we learn how to create all different types of masks and hide. The problem with hiding is that if I'm hiding, I'm not showing up, and if I'm not showing up, I cannot be in a relationship because I'm not there. There's a facade, there's a mask of me there, but I'm not there. So that's the problem with masks. However, as Rabbi Steinsaltz explains through the chapter, that while that is true, it is also true that we do need some level of masks, as we're going to see. And a lot of times the masks that we wear are the parts that we play in life. For example, rabbi can be a mask, because it is now I have a role that I can sit in, and I can stand behind, and I can instruct people to be silent because the rabbi is speaking. And that's using it as a mask in many respects, right? I mean, there are times when that is appropriate, but when we're using it to serve us, it's a mask. When we're using it to serve others, it's not a mask. That's probably the way I would differentiate between when it is a mask and not. So if I am getting everyone quiet because you must respect the rabbi, and that's because I need respect, and that's not very uncommon, then that is a mask. That's just me finding a place where I can control other people and feel important about myself. Where it's a situation where people are trying to hear a class and someone is interrupting, and that's used to serve the class, then that's not a mask. That's actually serving, who the person is. And as we know that there are some people are more. Just a moment. Some people are more real than other people. I would say that's true by nature. By nature, some people are by nature more real. And then it's also learned. So it doesn't have to be by nature at all, because some people learn it very well. Meaning what they learn is how to show up. Now we're going to see it's not always proper to show up. It's not always proper to be real. That's another big thing. I just read a fascinating article, actually. I don't know. I get this email with like a list of different interesting articles. And there was this fascinating article. It was really engaging. One of the most interesting articles I've read in a long time, about a person who writes how he was raised in a home where his parents always spoke the truth, straight up, all the time. Yeah, and they would call everything as it was and say everything the way it was, and a lot of people didn't like that. But he was raised that this is the way to go about life, and he saw a lot of virtue in that. There is a lot of virtue and a lot of benefit in doing that. And he says, he must be a Jewish guy, because he said, I asked my rabbi about, I'm not going to even repeat it, but it's things which a 13-year-old boy typically would not raise with his rabbi. Okay. But it was maybe normal. It was normal things that a person thinks about, but it's not the classic things that a 13-year-old boy speaks about. And he was like, straight up about everything. And he used to, and he said, when I felt like crying, I would cry. Right. And that didn't always serve him well in friendship, because not everyone wants to be exposed all the time. And not everyone wants to be asked questions because you're thinking about it. I don't want you asking me about that. Right. But that was the type of home he was raised in. But the interesting thing is that the story goes on. This is a perfect example of this whole chapter, that when he gets older and he starts dating and he's in relationships, he begins to realize that this brutal honesty doesn't work in relationships. And in fact, he can't sustain a relationship. And so he decides he's going to pull back, and he's going to stop being so brutally honest and direct about everything, and actually maybe couch himself a little bit in a certain position. And he began to see the virtue of the fact that there needs to be a blend here. And that's the whole idea, that there are certain masks that we need, but we wear far more masks. Most people, I'll say, wear far more masks than we need to. And we do that for our own, so we shouldn't have to deal with our own selves. And that's a problem. So again, it's the same example, the same criteria I gave with the rabbi example. When it's just to serve us, then usually the mask is problematic, because it's going to keep us very distant from people, and it's going to keep us, most importantly, it's going to keep us distant from ourselves. And the more distant I am from myself, the more distant I am from people. The more comfortable I am with myself, the more comfortable I will be with other people. That's actually a rule, a tried and proven rule. So, but when I have masks on to integrate with society, with other people, it's not to protect me, but it's to create a safe relationship. That's appropriate, and that's what he gets to. And we change masks quite frequently. It's not, because it's like a garment. It's like, clothing. Clothing can be changed. But we change masks, but we never keep ourselves completely naked. By the way, I read a fantastic book. If you want to read, this you have to appreciate this type of a book. But it's a business book, which I don't read. I don't typically read business books. It is a business book, but it's all about character. It's not about it's about how character serves in, we'll say, sales is the context that they use it in. But it's not only sales; it's also in serving people. So it's and it's called. I'm telling you what the book is about first, so you shouldn't be misled by the title, which is. But the name of the book is Getting Naked, and you can, if you're interested, you can look it up. It's I don't remember the name of the author, but the author apparently, I found out after hearing about it, wrote a good number of books and is somewhat well known. An Italian last name, I think, starts with a P. So if you check it out on Amazon, but anyway, it's a small book, but it's brilliant. It's a brilliant book because he writes it in the story of the storyline. Basically, is there's a major like corporate America consulting company, and then there's a little, mom and pop consulting company that opens up, and this big company is always being antagonized by the small one. Why? Because the small one somehow picks up a lot of clients that they're both fighting for over the big corporate, impressive company. And the corporate can't figure out what it is. They end up buying the small one. This is all like a metaphor, really, but it's a real life. It's a real life. I mean, it's written beautifully. And so you learn it through the story. And they see how the consultants in this small company, they're real. They're not trying to make themselves look good. Big thing. They're not trying to show how much they know. And they also don't couch advice in a way that the client should like them. They tell the client what the client really needs to hear in order to be able to move forward. And they discover that, wow, it actually works. It's not as if the client says, I don't want to hear that, get out of my office. On the contrary, they're thrilled that someone's actually telling them what's really going on that they're not seeing. And they're thrilled to have a client who walks in and is willing to serve them before they even have the deal. So in their first, when they come into the company just for the first meeting to get to know what the potential client is looking for, right at that meeting, as they're hearing what's going on, they're already consulting them. Whereas, most other people, they want to hold on to the goods until they're hired, and then I'll give you information. So it's really very interesting. But we are never completely naked, and I don't mean it in the physical sense, but we dress up as a professional. I'm a professional. Like that's why we always ask in America. I think it's probably everywhere. We ask, what do you do? Right? Like, is there a better question to ask someone when we first meet them? Is there something more important for us to be able to know than what do they do? Yeah. I like asking people, what are your hobbies? Do you read? What type of books do you enjoy reading? I'm getting to know the person, right? By asking those questions. When I hear their job, I just know what they decided to do to make money. A lot of people hate their job. Actually, most people don't like their job. So it's not an indication. No, oh, Linda, you didn't like that. I don't know. I thought statistics show that like most people are unhappy with their job. I don't know. It may not be with their occupation. It may just be with their job, which means then that their occupation would express what they enjoy. Okay, I caught myself there. But I do know a good number of people also who have gone, for example, this is an example I've encountered a number of times. I've gone to law school, and a few years into being a lawyer, just say, I don't want to do, this is not what I want to do. But whatever it is. So we put on the professional mask, which is the profession we take on, which includes rabbi. That could be a very strong mask. There's the mask of a parent, right? Like, okay, now I'm in parent mode, right? Why not just be in real mode, right? Instead of being the parent, I'm a father figure for my kids, right? And we have these things about men don't cry, like all of these things. These are all masks that we wear because we learn it from someone or whatever it may be, right? Like how many kids were told by their parents, especially boys, right? We're told by the parents, don't cry, right? Because there's this this masculine thing. And then, I'm just using this as one example of an endless number of examples of things that we're taught it's so that we are not expressing what's really going on, right? And then we have the spouse mask, that's another mask. So, and how we dress ourselves is a mask. And the funny thing is, we change how we dress depending on who we're hanging around with. Clearly demonstrating that our clothing, which has great importance, it's not only a mask, or it is really a mask, but it's an important mask too, because it would be inappropriate for someone to physically not be unclothed. And that again goes to the point that masks have a role. Masks definitely have a role, but when we're changing our the way we dress for this person or that person or for this crowd or that crowd, while sometimes that is appropriate, right? It's appropriate to dress one way in the gym and one way in the office, depending on what your occupation is, right? But sometimes we're doing it to create impressions on people, which is a whole different type of a mask, right? Which is serving me, what I want people to think about me, as opposed to me, it's serving the role of service that I have to other people. And some people are fantastic at changing their masks at lightning speed. And those are the people who are masterful at a party. And they can literally jump from person to person and play a whole different role, a whole different personality with each person. So they're a great social mixer and they are a great actor. And very often we see that virtuously. It's like, wow, I wish I was able to do that. But that's not necessarily a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing either. It could be a beautiful thing because you learn how to work with different people and providing them with what they need. But the question is, who is it serving? Is it to serve people or is it to serve me? And if it's about me gaining points that everyone likes me, that's very self-serving. And usually that happens through me hiding myself. When it's to serve other people, it's usually not so much hiding myself as it is expressing myself differently to each person. Another interesting thing is that some of our masks are very conscious. Like we walk into a party and we smile to everyone. We go to a funeral and we put on a sad face. If you ever notice this, by the way, this is something that I've noticed, and I think it's worth paying attention to. When you walk into a Shiva home, right? Notice, I hope you never walk into a Shiva home, but if you ever do, or to a funeral, notice what you consciously do, or not even, or you subconsciously, because you very often don't notice this, due to our facial expression, and ask yourself why you're doing that. Right? Does me putting on a sad, pitiful face serve the mourner or not? I'm just putting that question out there. Okay? And a lot of what we do is out of our own discomfort and not knowing what to do. That's a lot of what we do. And so we have these unconscious behaviors that are learned as well. Like we learn when someone speaks to us to nod. Sometimes we're not even listening to them because we're just our mind somewhere else, but we're just nodding. And that's a mask. That's just a cover up, right? Children learn to cry for attention. Nothing's hurting them. They're just crying because they want attention. That's a mask. They smile. Kids learn this very early on. Smile to people. There's a much better chance you're going to get the lollipop because now you're cute. And this becomes a way of life for many people, right? We're also always trying to ingratiate people in order to get what we want. And we learn certain phrases to say in order to, to get through to people, which again is a form of a mask. Then there's social pressure to pretend that we're worse than we are. Sometimes social pressure teaches us to be harsh, to be arrogant, to be tough, all of these different things, which are not the beauty of who we are. But that's what we learn from social pressure. That's the way we learn from social pressure to behave. And these are all different forms of masks. And he has a great story, which is sort of what I referred to earlier, with intimate relationships, where people lose in intimate relationships, where it can be really destructive. Because here you're trying to create an intimate relationship, but the mask itself prevents intimacy. And one example he uses is a woman who he spoke to before getting married, if I remember correctly, and she came from a home of very direct, open, truthful, say everything, and he told her that's not a very good idea, marriage. Right? It's not because we want to hide things from our spouse, but maybe our spouse doesn't want to deal with that right now. They're not ready to deal with that. So don't just confront them and force them to deal with something. That may make them so uncomfortable, it's going to really be a very big problem in the marriage. So again, this is an example of using a mask in a healthy way. And he says that 6 months later, he met the husband and wife, and it was a mess because of the way she was behaving. And she had to learn how to, couch things and mask things so that she wasn't too abrupt or in the face of her spouse. And that's the positive side of a mask, to use it to protect ourselves or to protect others. Okay, so to protect ourselves, sometimes we can get hurt if we don't use a mask. Then it's a very important time to use a mask. Sometimes it's needed as a shield. Here's a very interesting thing that we had in our Tanya class. Some of you take the Tanya class, so you may remember this. I think it may have been this past, I don't know if it was yesterday's class. I believe it was. What are we? We're Wednesday, on Monday's class, 2 days ago. There's a concept in Hasidic philosophy. So it's a philosophical concept, but it's like a mystical concept or a spiritual concept. And that is that in order for God to create the world, God needed to hide himself. He put on a mask. That mask is in fancy language called tzimtzum, contraction, where God minimizes his light. What does minimize his light mean? Minimize light means you put a mask, just like Moses. When he came down from the mountain, his head was beaming with light. And so he wore a mask. The Torah says he wore a mask to limit the light so it wouldn't be too intense for the Jewish people who would come to speak to him. So God creates a mask also. It's very important to know that the very word for world, the world, how do you say a world in Hebrew? Olam. And the word olam, actually, the root of that word is he'olam, which means hidden, because the world is a mask of God. That is what the world is. As far as Judaism is concerned, you want to know what the world is? It's an environment that hides God. That's what the world is. And that's embedded in the Hebrew word for world, because that's what the world does. It's an environment where everything seems on appearance to be independent, and really it's all dependent on God. How can it seem independent if it's dependent? Because it's hiding the reality of God. So, but here's the thing. If God did not limit his light with a mask, so to speak, then there would never be able to be creation. So God can be revealed to lower levels if God puts on a mask. In the same way that the brilliant professor can take his brilliance and shine an element of it to his students if he masks his brilliance and only lets a certain amount of it filter through on the level that the students can comprehend. So then you have a mask which seems to be hiding, but actually it's also revealing. It depends which side of the mask you're on. It seems to be hiding, but it's actually revealing. And that's the irony of every mask. That on one hand, a mask is hiding, and that could be a negative thing. On the other hand, a mask permits revelation elsewhere, and that can be a very positive thing. So if I'm in a relationship with someone and I'm unmasked, they can't deal with me, right? There's too much stuff to deal with. And that's why the mask actually permits the proper amount of, in other words, if I mask myself properly, usually we overmask ourselves because we're very self-consumed. But if I mask myself properly, it's enough that can shine forth to be in a relationship where this person feels me and who I am, etc. But there are certain things I know that are either negative about me or difficult for them to deal with. And those things I mask a little bit so we can be in this relationship. And as self-aware beings, which is the great gift of being a human being, is that we are self-aware beings, unlike most other creations or all other creations. Humans have the ability to be self-aware. We have to choose which mask we're going to be wearing. Is it going to be a mask to hide or a mask to reveal? Right? What is the purpose of this mask? Is it to hide me or to reveal me? Now, ultimately, both masks end up hiding. But what is your ultimate objective? Is your ultimate objective hiding or revealing? If it's for revealing, you take the type of mask that serves the other person. If it's for hiding, I take the type of mask that's going to serve me. And that's why he says a turtle doesn't change its shell, but we change our shells an awful lot. Those are our masks that we're changing all the time. And when we wear masks long enough, they begin to they begin to create who we are in many respects. And once taken off, there's an imprint from wearing that mask for so long, which is really interesting. So we are always going to be people who are going to be changing our masks. But we never seem to fully get rid of masks because there is purpose in wearing a mask. Just like we have a fear, just like we have a fear undressing physically in most places, which is a very healthy fear, or it's a healthy sense of appropriateness. We'll say that. Okay, I don't know that we should live in fear of it, but it's a very healthy level of appropriateness. But we have a much deeper fear of undressing spiritually. That's a huge fear that we have. And very often that's because we have this notion. This is extremely common. This I will definitely say is more than 50%. I say it's probably more than 90%. And that is that we have this belief that we have this inner ugliness that people are going to discover about us if we reveal ourselves. And so therefore, we are playing this game our entire life. And sometimes we feel like we're like an onion, where if you continue to pull off all the layers, what do you end up left with? Well, if you do that with an onion, you're left with nothing. And that's what we're scared of very often. We feel that we're a fraud. There's no one behind all this. And if I continue peeling off these masks, people are going to find out that I'm a nobody, I'm a nothing. These are wrong. Let me be clear about that. Unhealthy beliefs that unfortunately the vast majority of human beings have. And that's why we have such a deep fear of undressing spiritually. And that's why it's good to learn slowly and gently with guidance, so it's done in a stable way, how to slowly peel off some of the masks that we have, and to realize that the more exposed we are, the more beautiful we are, and the deeper our connection is with other people, because now we are showing up a little bit. Do not take off all our masks, because as we discussed, some of our masks have great service. And this is reflected in the idea that when we come home, if we go to a job that has a formal attire, and we come home, we want to take off our suit at the end of the day. We want to stop being politically correct. Can I just say what I feel? Right? So you come home to your spouse and you vent to them a little bit, right? And what happens when we do that? We feel lighter, we feel freer, we feel happier, and we feel more true. However, that's not entirely accurate, which is very insightful, a very big insight that he shares. If we are stripped of our culture, of our language, of our thoughts and ideas, we're left with our spirit. Is that our true self? Well, self is a combination of a whole bunch of things which are probably beyond what we can fully grasp. And part of our self very often includes the masks that we wear, or the healthy masks that we wear. So it's like asking, the guy who says, I want to feel lighter and freer, happier, and more true. So I'm just going to say it the way it is. No more political correctness. I don't care what anyone thinks over here. Right? I would ask that person, is someone who expresses a naked, which can be used literally or metaphorically, shameless desire, a superior person? Is someone who comes into a room and says, and puts on the table all of their weaknesses, would we say that is superior character? No, it's completely inappropriate. And it's not serving to anybody. We know what it's similar to, actually, as it reminds me. There's a lot of talk nowadays about vulnerability, being vulnerable. Make yourself vulnerable. Now, vulnerability can be done in a healthy fashion, and in which case it's very productive. It can be done in a very unhealthy fashion where it's very counterproductive. In fact, exactly the opposite of what it's intended to be. The idea of vulnerability is to be more of a real person. And that must be done in a proper context. It doesn't mean you just spill everything about you out to the public. And now with social media and people who don't understand what vulnerability is, they think that by sharing with the world the spite they just had with their spouse, they're being vulnerable. No, you're not being vulnerable. You're being foolish. And you're taking something that belongs in your home and you're putting it out into a public space. That's inappropriate. It doesn't serve your marriage, and it doesn't serve the public, who are very uncomfortable hearing this. Right? So that's not a virtue. A virtue is when I'm by my therapist to be honest about what's really going on and not to hide. Right? That's being vulnerable. Or directly to my spouse. Telling my spouse what's hard for me to tell them about what I'm feeling. That's vulnerability in the context, in a proper container. Then it's a beautiful thing. So that's why masks are a negative thing, but they're also a very positive thing, because we need to have masks which create a certain container. And this all goes to a fascinating conversation that took place between Rabbi Akiva and Tinius Rufus, otherwise known in the Talmud as Turnus Rufus, where this is a well-known conversation, a piece of Talmud. It's a conversation where Turnus Rufus asks Rabbi Akiva, what's superior, nature or what we make of it? Right? The way God created the world, or how we change things in the world? Which is another way of asking, what's superior, God's work or ours? And so Rabbi Akiva responded, quite surprisingly, but very insightfully, man's work is greater. That what we change of nature is greater than nature itself. And he says, let me ask you a question. Do you prefer wheat or do you prefer bread? Beautiful example. We have a duty with the nature that God created. The conversation also goes to circumcision. And where Rabbi Akiva shows that God commands us to circumcise to demonstrate that our job is to perfect what he created. God deliberately designed things that way. Which means that our natural self is not superior to the self that we present. Just as the natural world is not superior to the refined world that we create. So there's my natural self, part of my natural self is an animal soul. And that animal soul has desires and fantasies which are nothing to be proud of, right? And surely nothing to speak about. Surely not publicly, unless I'm dealing with them, and then dealing with them, it has to be in the right container. When hopefully we do deal with them in the right container, right? But that's just inappropriate to just dump it out in a public space. Even though it is my nature. So I'm just being me. I'm just being me. Right? We don't want you to just be you. We want you to be a refined you. And if you have that dark side in you, like we all do, keep it closed up. Yeah, that's a good thing, actually. It's not good to expose it. And this is expressed also in the clothing that the Kohen is commanded to wear. The priests are commanded to wear in the temple, where they have to wear breeches. And part of the breeches is to cover their nakedness. That's what the Torah says. And to cover their nakedness from who? It's actually to cover their nakedness from themselves, to teach us that there is a nakedness about every one of us that needs to be covered. There are parts of ourselves that are better not exposed, even to ourselves. Yeah, it's good to have a lid and not hear from it for a few days. That's a very productive thing. As a French philosopher, he quote said, if people were punished for their thoughts, all would deserve hanging several times a day. Right? And that's the reality. And that's, on one hand, we have to be aware of the fact that this is part of being human. We don't condemn ourselves for this. Yeah, we're human. We have thoughts, we have fantasies, we have inclinations to things that we're a little bit surprised we even have. But you know what? We lock it up and we don't express it. That's the difference between a stable person and an unstable person. An unstable person actually acts on it. Stable person says, yeah, I have it under control. So we don't expose it. There's a very interesting Mishnah which says that if a person pretends to be lame in order to get charity, so he hops on a foot and uses a crutch, and it's all a hoax just to get people to give him charity, he will not die before becoming lame. But God says, you act that way, you put on this mask, I'm going to make this who you are. The lie actually becomes true. The mask becomes a reality. And he says an interesting thing, which it's interesting in the way he says this, because you see there's a story with I think it's with the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe. This is in probably the first part of the 19th century, probably is when it was, or the last part of the 18th century. Someone came to him. There was a very big opposition at that time to the Hasidic movement, which was still young and new. And because Hasidim conduct themselves in a very, in a visibly and noticeably different lifestyle and mannerisms than the non-Hasidic world, at that time, people were very weary of this Hasidic movement. And the Alter Rebbe actually was the one who was sort of the leader of the Hasidic, of all of the Hasidic groups in the face of the antagonism. So someone came to him and said, all of you Hasidim, they make themselves so happy. They pray for so many hours. Normally someone prays for 45 minutes or an hour every morning. Your Hasidim stand and they pray for 2-3 hours as if they're so devout. I know some of your Hasidim, they're simpletons. They don't have any sophisticated, they're not very intelligent people, right? Some of them. And they act as if they're so holy. They pray for 3 hours a day. So the Alter Rebbe said, I wish upon them the curse of the Mishnah. What's the curse of the Mishnah? That if someone acts as if they're lame, they will become lame. So he says, that's what I wish upon my Hasidim, that they act as if they're so pious, let them be cursed to become pious. Right? Like, what are you complaining about? That they're acting pious? That should be the problem of our world, that we have people, frauds, who are acting pious. Right? Now, Rabbi Steinsaltz brings out another point, though, that sometimes a person acts like a saint because they want to have recognition and acknowledgement. They want to have the honor, the glory that comes with being a saint. They don't realize that being a saint is not a simple thing at all. It's a very hard thing. It's actually much easier to be a bum than it is to be a saint. Right? Being a saint is real development. Right? They don't realize how hard that is. And God said, you want to fake being a saint? You won't die without becoming a saint. And you'll have all of the way he writes it, you'll have all of the challenges that come with that. But as when Hashem gave the Torah to the Jews at Mount Sinai, it says, Hashem said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God. In Hebrew, your, Y-O-U-R, is different for singular and for plural. You use different words. In English, it's the same. Your can be singular, as in yours, right? Or your can be plural, as in your, speaking to a crowd. It's the same word. In Hebrew, it's not. So in Hebrew, if I want to say, I am God, your God, and I'm talking to a mass of people, like God was at Mount Sinai, I say, Anochi Hashem Elokeichem, your God. I am God, your God. But God didn't say that, even though he's speaking to about approximately 3 million people, which is what God should have said. God said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am God, your God, as if he was speaking to every individual person. Why? Well, there are a number of reasons why. The first reason why is because God wants every one of us to know that he's in a relationship with you. He's not in a relationship with us. He's in a relationship with you and you and you and you, with every single one of us. We all have a personal relationship with God. But in the context of our conversation, God appeared to every person in the manner, and only an infinite God can do this at one time. When he appeared, everyone experienced him in the manner that they were capable of experiencing him, because we're all very different. And it's the same thing we're talking about leaders, that leaders have to reach out to each person differently. The talent, the gift of a good leader, and this is expressed about Moses and Joshua, is because when Moses appointed Joshua, told God that he wants to appoint a successor, he said he wants a successor who can identify with the spirit of every individual person. That's the power of a very powerful leader. And so the leader reaches each person differently. And so the question is, so then ultimately we have to ask ourselves, if at the end of all this, and in order to do that, you need to have different masks as you're engaging with each person. So at the end, so the summation of this whole chapter is that the question is not whether we should or should not be wearing masks. It's clear that we need to wear some masks. The question is, which is the best mask to wear? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. Which is the appropriate mask to wear? And this is our unique character, he concludes, that the capacity to choose our mask. That is our power as human beings. To be able to get rid of masks which are just hiding us, and to wear masks which are serving the context, the environment, the container that we're in, and the people around us. Those are very productive masks. So when we celebrate Purim, God willing, in a month, we have a whole new understanding, I believe, of the value of masks. And the mask of Purim, the reason why we wear masks on Purim is because Purim is similar to when God created the world. When the story of Purim is a story where God created an unbelievable miracle, but in a very masked way. In fact, so much so that when the Megillah was written, they wrote it without mentioning God's name once in the Megillah. Because God is entirely masked, because the miracle all happened it was hidden in nature. But the Kabbalists tell us that every time the Megillah says Melech, the king, which in the storyline refers to Achashverosh, the wicked king. If when you follow the story in a spiritual storyline, it always refers to God. But it's God in this hidden manner, with a mask on, right? With a mask on. What's a greater? Let me throw this last idea out to you. What's a greater miracle? Is a greater miracle, as we're going to read on Shabbos this week, the splitting of the Red Sea, right? Or the fact that Israel won the 6-day war? Which one's a greater miracle? Which do you think? So, being that you're all muted, I'll say that typically we would think the splitting of the sea was like a miracle. Could you imagine you're standing in the Atlantic and it splits? Okay, I know it wasn't the Atlantic. It was a river. But still, right? Just imagine that though for a second, right? Whatever it is, you're standing here in the Delaware River. We have it right here. Delaware River, right? How wide is Delaware River? It's a half a mile? I mean, less? Quarter of a mile? It's not very wide, right? So imagine it splits. Whoa! It just stops. You see two walls of water. Right. That's awesome, boy. I would love to see that. Then I would believe in God. If I saw that, I would believe in God, right? But the 6-day war, well, yeah, I mean, they had an army. They took planes. They bombed the enemy strategically. They won the war. It's not as big of a miracle. I mean, maybe. I don't even know if it is a miracle. That's what someone can say, right? Here's the reason why the 6-day war is a much greater miracle than the splitting of the sea. Because it was the infinite miraculous energy of God as it expressed itself within the limitations of nature. You see, for the infinite energy of God to express itself by breaking nature, it's very impressive. It's awesome fireworks, so to speak. But it's not creating any transformation of any sort. It's just telling the world, get out of the way. We're going to do something. We're going to do some God now. Some God works here. But when God says, I'm going to show you God in the context of nature, that is the world itself, nature itself, becoming a vehicle and an expression of God, which is actually our entire purpose here in this world. And that means that God has to now, he can't just show up. He's got to fit it in. God's wearing a mask while he's expressing himself. So wearing a mask actually is a powerful thing, as long as it's the right mask. We just need to know how to choose our masks wisely. All right.